Hi, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on accelerating business model development with generative AI. So I'm Dries, and what I want to discuss with you today are three topics. First of all, I want to explain you a bit how today at WHU we are trying to kind of really integrate generative AI into our education on business model development. And more specifically, we have started experimenting with AI agents. And so I want to give you several examples of AI agents that we use in different steps of our business model development education. And actually, on top of that, by showing these AI agents, I also want to show you some opportunities on how you can actually integrate AI applications in a rather cost-effective way in education, because of course, we don't want to overload our students with subscriptions or additional costs. And I want to give you some suggestions on how you can do that. So let me briefly explain how we at WHU typically approach business model development in several courses. For instance, I'm responsible for the obligatory entrepreneurship course in our bachelor program. And also in that course, we apply the business model development cycle following a bit the lean startup approach, where we always start with pushing students to think about a problem worth solving. So we don't start with solutions, we start with problems. Then based on an identified problem, students have to come up with a value proposition. Then they have to build the whole business model canvas around it from Osterwalder and Pigneur. Subsequently, they have to formulate a number of core hypotheses that they then have to test with experiments and minimal viable products, which in the end allows them to pivot their business model. So these are kind of the traditional steps we take in our business model development courses, which of course highly reflects what also startups typically are doing in the initial stages, and what startups also kind of get pushed when they are in incubators or accelerators. And so what I want you to show is how we, in the different steps, try to integrate generative AI nowadays. And actually, the first step is that students really need to have a good understanding about which problem do they want to solve. And I actually explained in an earlier webinar already how you can today leverage generative AI to do insightful interviews about pain points. So you can actually use ChatGPT or any other tool that you want to use to kind of engage in interviews. And this is an example that I shared before. So you can simply instruct ChatGPT that it should act, in this case, as a family of 2 adults and 2 children, and that you want to talk with these personas about a particular pain point. In this case, I use the example of the pain point of monitoring and paying energy bills. And you can simply instruct it that you want to engage in a conversation. And then actually, you can really engage in a conversation. ChatGPT will give you some answers. As parents, you can ask follow-up questions. And in that way, you can easily start doing customer interviews in a synthetic manner. And maybe a nice thing to emphasize, if you go to your mobile, you can also have ChatGPT on your mobile. And on your mobile, if you open ChatGPT and you go kind of to the bottom right, you will see a headphone sign. And if you press on that headphone sign, you can actually talk with ChatGPT. And actually, for doing interviews, I think it's a very nice tool because that allows you to actually kind of imitate interviews in a very natural manner. So let me briefly illustrate that, how you can do it. At the moment, the chat function, the voice function is not yet perfect. So sometimes there is some kind of lag in between. Actually, ChatGPT is kind of introducing a new kind of dimension where that will be solved. But even now, I think it's already quite powerful. So let me briefly illustrate. So I will start the chat, I will instruct the chat, and then I will engage in a conversation with it. You are a family of 2 adults and 2 children who are living in a rented apartment in a large city. I'm a startup founder who wants to develop a new business to address the topic of monitoring and paying energy bills. I want to engage in a customer interview with you to explore pain points regarding paying energy bills. I will be the interviewer and you will be the customer. Here is my first question. What is for you the hardest part about paying energy bills?
Honestly, the hardest part for us is how unpredictable the bills can be. We never know exactly how much they're going to be from month to month, which makes it tough to plan our budget. Sometimes it feels like we're paying a lot more than expected, even though our energy usage hasn't changed that much. And with kids in the house, we use a fair amount of energy. So it's frustrating when the costs suddenly spike. Also, the bills aren't very clear. They don't give a detailed breakdown of what's driving the cost. It's like, here's your total, but we don't know if it's because of heating, appliances, or something else. So it's hard to figure out where we can cut back to save money. What kinds of solutions are you thinking about to help with that?
I have some ideas in my mind, but I actually want to get a better understanding about what you have already tried to solve this issue.
That makes sense. Well, we've tried a few things to manage our energy costs. For one, we've made a conscious effort.
As you can see, you can quite quickly engage in a quite natural conversation. You see that sometimes there is a kind of lag that also depends a bit on the quality of your internet connection. Today, I have a lot of issues, but in the end, you can actually already engage in quite a nice conversation. And actually, the nice thing is that now I have done this conversation with ChatGPT, and then you can actually go to your ChatGPT account. So let me briefly do that. So I will now go to my ChatGPT account. And then actually you will see there the transcript of your interview. Yeah? So if I now go to my latest kind of conversation, you will see that here actually I have a transcript of the interview that I started to do. So in that way, you can also then have a kind of transcript that you can analyze later on. So I think that's a very nice kind of feature to have that can also allow students to really train themselves in doing good interviews. Of course, they will not fully replace real interviews, but it's a good training tool. And actually, they can already get a lot of valuable information in that respect. Now, in our newest course, we actually went one step further and I built an application called the Autonomous Customer Interviewer. And this is really an application where we leverage AI agents. And I will immediately explain a bit more what that means, but let me first kind of demonstrate how the tool works. Now, for this tool, you need a kind of what is called API key. And that's a key to be able to talk with specific providers. And in this case, we use the Croc API key. And Croc is a new company that is actually trying to be a competitor of NVIDIA. So it's a kind of chip producing company. But they also have developed a platform. And on the platform, you can use different open source language models, like Llama 3, for instance. So if you go to the website console.croc.com, you can go to the playground. And when you're logged in, you can actually apply for an API key. And logging in simply means that you have to give your email address and then you will have to confirm in your inbox. So then you're logged in and then you can get an API key. And that API key you can then use in my application. So that's the only thing you would need. You can play around with the application that I developed. You will find here the link in the slide. And so with that key, you can start using this application. So let me show you a bit how it works. So I will now go to the actual application. So this is the Autonomous Customer Interviewer. So this is simply a Streamlit application that is publicly available. So I now already entered my API key, but so when you have acquired an API key, you can just here enter your API key. And now it asks me, okay, what is the pain points for your interview? So we will use again the same pain points, paying and monitoring energy bills. And it asks me about a profile of a customer. So again, we can say family with 2 kids living in a rented apartment. And actually, if it's not when it's not the first time that you do this, you can also already add some learnings. Yeah? So if you have learnings from other interviews, you can add them here. Now we will not do that. So we can just leave it open. And now we can do start interview. And you will see that the app is saying, okay, I'm running. So now actually the agents are running. And I will immediately explain what the agents actually do. And here is already the output. And so what did they actually do? A first agent has now actually created a list of interview questions for a customer interview. Yeah, so it actually created like 19 questions. And subsequently, a second agent actually has executed the interview using the questions of the first agent. So you see here indeed that you get a kind of transcript of an interviewer who is talking with a customer, and we receive the full transcript as this agent has been kind of asking questions based on the questions generated by the first agent. And finally, the final agents that we have is an agent that has created learnings from the interview. So here the transcript ended, and here a third agent has actually analyzed the transcript of this interview to summarize the most important learnings. So what can we actually learn from this interview? So with this tool, you can do very quickly a lot of interviews with different kind of customers and get a lot of learnings out of it. So that's the tool we have developed to actually push our students to do a lot of interviews and to get a lot of learnings on the pain points that they want to explore. Now, let me briefly explain a bit more what is going on here in the backend. So in the end, this is an application where we have used what I call AI agents. And so AI agents are rather autonomous agents that can independently write prompts. So instead of you writing prompts, it's actually the agents that will write prompts themselves based on some instructions that you give them. So we are actually here outsourcing to some extent the prompting that we typically do in generative AI, and it's the agents that will do the prompting. They will evaluate the answers, and they will also decide themselves if they have to do additional prompting or whether the kind of information that they have collected is good enough to go to the next task. And the nice thing is that you can actually define multiple agents and let them collaborate together. So we can actually have teams of agents. And I will immediately show you the team that I've created for this application. And this also means that now the amount of work that they can do becomes very scalable, especially if you do it into the coding. And so just to show you, this is actually the team of agents that I have built to do these 3 different tasks. And we use for this a library called Crew AI. So that's a Python library that you can use to build agents, which is very user-friendly. So what you in the end need to do is you need to define in your coding these 3 agents. So you have to explain what is the question generator, what is its role, its goal, and you give it some backstory, some information about what this question generator is. You do the same for the interviewer and the same for the analyzer. And then you have to just instruct them, okay, this is a team that works in a sequential manner. So it's first the question generator, then the interviewer, then the analyzer. And based on that information, it can fully automatically execute this autonomous interview as I showed you before. So that's really the power of AI agents. So I hope you see this go way beyond you just prompting. Actually, here everything happens quite automatically. So in that way, it can be quite powerful. After students have kind of analyzed the pain point, then it's time to think about the value proposition. Yeah, so the solution. What is the unique solution that you will bring forward? And again, also here, generative AI can really help students to ideate about what kind of solutions could we develop to solve our pain points. And again, prompting here can be very valuable. And the first approach is to do what we call chain of thought prompting. And that means you will give ChatGPT a task, but you will also explain the steps that it needs to execute for the task. That's what's called chain of thought prompting. And we know from prompting research that this tends to provide very good results. So just to briefly show you what can be a chain of thought prompt for ideating on value propositions. Yeah, so we first of all give it some context. We tell ChatGPT that it has awesome skills in creating value propositions. And now that I want it to generate a value proposition for this pain point, and again, we use the same example, people struggle to monitor energy bills, but I also give it some steps that it needs to follow. That's why I'm saying, look, first you need to identify the hardest part of the pain point. Then you have to think about an optimal customer segment. And based on that, you should come up with a value proposition. And if we do that, you will see now, if we execute it, that it perfectly follows this logic. So it first thinks about hardest part, then about optimal customer segment, and finally, it gives me a value proposition. So chain of thought prompting tends to be a very valuable approach to push ChatGPT in a certain direction. Of course, it can happen that you have a task and that you don't really know what are the steps that need to be accomplished for this task. In this case, I know quite well as an entrepreneurship professor how a value proposition should be developed, but it might be that I'm not an entrepreneurship professor and that I don't know the steps. So what can we do then? And actually here, OpenAI just released a new powerful model called OpenAI 01, or it's also called Strawberry. And this is actually a model. At the moment, you can only use it when you have a subscription to ChatGPT. So that's a bit of a limitation today. But this is a model that will actually, before giving an answer, will think, will reason. And what does that mean in ChatGPT language? Actually, in this case, ChatGPT itself will think about, okay, you're giving me a task. What should actually be the steps that I need to do the task? And then it will execute the task, evaluate the task, and then give you a response. So let us maybe do that live so that you can see how it works. So I will copy now my prompt into ChatGPT. So let me start a new ChatGPT. And now, of course, I will go to the O1. So that's the newest model. So it's at the moment in preview. So I will now copy my prompts. And you see again, you have awesome skills in generating a unique value proposition. So I ask it to create a value proposition. But so now I'm not giving it any steps. So now we can press enter. And now you see it starts thinking. And now you see it starts kind of listing steps to be taken. And now it has thought for 8 seconds, and now it has given me a value proposition. Of course, this seems to be quite magic, but let us now ask, what are the steps you have taken to provide this output? And now it's thinking again, okay, what did I do? And now it will actually show me the underlying process. Yeah? So it's that I first identified the core problem. I then considered how a solution could address. Finally, I incorporated a compelling product name. So these are actually the steps it took to give me the answer. So this new model that ChatGPT has brought on the market is actually a model that allows you to automate chain of thought reasoning and prompting. Now, I would say if you know the steps yourself, I would encourage people to do that yourself, because I think we still often know better what steps to be taken than a generative AI. But if you have no clue, or you would at least like to double check, maybe ChatGPT has some inspiration for other steps, then this is a very nice tool to experiment with. So that's about value proposition. Of course, when we want to create a new startup, we want to create a unique startup that is different from existing solutions. And this is not always easy to get with straightforward prompting in ChatGPT. But so here we actually need to push it a bit. And for that, it's important to search for competitors. And here, I think a very good tool is Perplexity AI. So Perplexity AI is another tool that is actually freely available. Again, you just have to create a login. And Perplexity AI more and more is a bit like the Google of generative AI. So this is actually a tool focused on doing research. And the great thing is that it always provides a lot of sources. So it will be very clear about where did I find information. So again, you can see the prompt that I've written here. Yeah? So I'm saying, look, I'm a founder that wants to build a startup with the following value proposition. So here I used one of these value propositions that we just created. I gave it some context. So I'm saying, look, you're a consultant from McKinsey that can help to identify existing companies that provide a similar value proposition. Please help me to identify these companies and provide a clear description of their value proposition. Please provide output in a table format. And then you will see that actually Perplexity AI gives me a nice table with examples of competitors. And here I can also see where it retrieved the information. And so Perplexity AI will always first go to the internet, search for information, and based on the collected information, give me an output, which actually heavily reduces the risk of hallucination. So this is definitely a very important, valuable tool to search for competitors. Now, as a next step, what we have done is to create another application. Let me go back to my slides briefly now. So, and that's called the Startup Competitor Analysis and Optimization Tool. So this is actually a tool, again, with some AI agents that work together, where the first agent will search the internet for competitors of your value proposition, scrape the internet of the competitors, and analyze the competitors and compare it with your value proposition. And based on that information that is collected by the first agent, a second agent will give you recommendations on how you can improve your value proposition, your pain point, and your customer segments. So that is what is happening in this application. Now for this application, again, I have added here the link so that you can explore it yourself. You, again, need your Croc API key. You can use the same one as you used for the other application, but now we need one more key called a Serper API key. And Serper is a company that actually has created an API so that in large language models, in your coding, you can engage in web searches. So agents that you code can use the Serper API to go to the internet and find information. And now the great thing is of Serper is that when you log in for the first time, so again, it's simply giving your email address, you will get 2,500 free queries, which is quite a lot. For instance, when you use my application one time, it will kind of require 5 to 10 queries. So you can already do quite some queries or quite some use of my application with these 2,500 queries. So that's kind of something you need to do. You need to go and get this API. And if you have the API, then you can use the application. So let me show you how it looks like. Now, in this case, I already executed everything because actually this is quite time consuming. So running this application can easily take 2, 3, even 5 minutes because a lot of things will be going on. Yeah? So we have this agent that will go to the internet, find competitors, scrape the websites, try again, try to optimize. And then in the end, it will push all the information it collected to a second agent who will use it for optimization. So quite some stuff is going on here in the backend. That means that it's quite time consuming. But so what is the input that you need to give? So again, I have given it here a value proposition. Yeah, so this is again a value proposition of a startup to monitor energy bills. I'm describing the pain points. Now here I do it very briefly. The more information you give, the better the output will be. Yeah? So I would actually encourage you to give more extensive descriptions of the pain points. And I've given a description of my target markets. And if you want, I've not yet done that now. If you already know a bit like this is kind of the unfair advantage that I think I can develop with my startup, you can also give that information. Then you simply have to click on start. And then again, the application will start running. Now I already did it now. And then you can see it's actually able to identify a number of competitors. And sometimes it's also able to give you the websites. So you see here quite some competitors identified. Not for all of them, it found a website, but at least you get a description. Of course, there's always a risk of hallucination, so you will have to double check. But most of the time, it tends to be quite accurate. And then it actually gives you some optimization advice. Yeah? So here, based on the competitor analysis, it will give you advice on how to optimize your value proposition, how to optimize the pain point that you have identified, and how to optimize your target markets. Now, not all of this advice might make sense, especially now because I have not given very extensive input. Some of the advice might be quite straightforward, but my experience is the more specific you are, the better the advice will be. And these applications are also really designed not to give you just a result, a solution, but actually to give you advice, because we use these applications in an educational setting where we want to kind of use them to help students to come up with better solutions, but it should be a kind of complement. It should not substitute for the student. So that's why we have designed these applications in such a way that they're all focused on giving advice, giving recommendations, not necessarily a kind of optimal solution, which is anyway nowadays still quite challenging with generative AI. Yes, so that's kind of second agent-based application that we developed. Next, our students have to build the business canvas model. So I think that's a tool that is used a lot, both in education, but also in practice. So these are kind of the typical building blocks that you have in a business model canvas. And also here, again, we have developed an application, same logic. Again, we need this Croc API key with Llama 3, because it's important to emphasize here, at the moment, using this is completely free. Yeah? So when you use the Croc API key, you don't have to give a credit card, so it's not paying you for tokens. Whereas, for instance, if you use the Open API key, then every time when you run this kind of applications with an Open API key, you have to pay money. Now, nowadays, also OpenAI has quite cost-efficient models like GPT-4 Mini, but still, especially because these applications are quite intensive in the amount of text that they generate, you might easily start spending euros when doing some iterations. Whereas with this approach, using the Croc API key, where we use Llama 3, that's the open source model of Meta, we are actually being able to give these applications to our students completely for free. Yeah? And also I can share them here with you. You can play with them as long as you have your own Croc API key. At the moment, there is no cost involved. So that's the big advantage. So what do we do with this tool? Let me again show you how this tool looks like. So this is a tool where the user is expected to give as input kind of a first description of all the elements of the business model canvas that he or she has developed. So you see it asks for a description of your value proposition, customer segment, distribution channels, customer relationship, revenue streams, key resources, key activities, key partners, and cost structure. So you have to fill in the different elements. You can leave an element open if you don't yet have inspiration, then it might actually help you. And now we can click on Start Business Model. And again, you see it now running. Now, again, here we don't go to the internet, so we stay within the large language model. And now as output, it will actually, first of all, do a critical analysis of your business model canvas. So here it's actually providing me some critical comments about what you can improve in your business model canvas. And in the backend, what I actually did was to push it to, for instance, think about, are there maybe inconsistencies between different building blocks in the business model canvas? Might one or more elements be underspecified? So this is kind of the critical evaluation you will get here based on the input that you have provided. And again, of course, the better your input, the more advanced the critical analysis will be. And on top of that, it will also give you some recommendation for optimization. And so here actually, so first it will give a critical analysis, and then it will give some recommendations about how you could address these critical comments. And again, this is mainly designed to help students to think about how can I improve my business model without giving it kind of an ultimate solution based on a large language model. Yeah, so we really want to build these tools as assistants, how they are called, so that in the end, they can push students to further optimize, to iterate, which is a very important part of business model development. So that's what we are trying here. When the business model canvas is created, the next step is typically that students have to formulate hypotheses. That means, what are actually the fundamental assumptions that you are developing in your business model? Because at the moment, we are just developing ideas, but in the end, these are simply assumptions about what we think customers need, about what we think customers are suffering, about what we think that customers are willing to pay. These are assumptions that we have, But as quickly as possible, we need to start testing these assumptions. So it's important to think about what are actually the core hypotheses that I have, so that you can test these hypotheses as quickly as possible. And here I developed another tool. Actually, here we use the GPT in ChatGPT, which nowadays, even in the free version, are available. So here you have the link to the tool. And so if you go to the GPT store, you will also find it. Here I also have the link. So let me briefly open the tool. And now we can just press start, and then it will give me some instructions. So here it's saying, look, to get started, you need to give a value proposition. So let me again go to a value proposition that we had before. Let me briefly check. Yes, so this is a value proposition we created. So I enter the value proposition and we press enter. And now you will see this GPT will immediately create a table where it kind of gives me suggestions about what could be important hypotheses to test, where it will make a distinction between desirability hypotheses, feasibility hypotheses, and viability hypotheses. So these are hypotheses related to different parts of the business model canvas. So it shows me what would be the hypothesis. It gives me some suggestions on how I could validate these hypotheses. Should I use a survey? Should I use an interview? So it gives me some suggestions. And it also gives me some suggestions about what could be validation thresholds. Yeah? So what would be the minimal percentage of users that should positively respond? These are some suggestions that it gives. Yeah? And so you see, in less than 1 minute, with this tool, you can easily have the students creating a list of hypotheses. And here, in contrast to the other applications that we have created, the other applications we have really hard-coded. Yeah? So there we use coding in Python, libraries in Python. This kind of tools are much easier to create. Yeah? So this is just a GPT. So I can briefly show you what we did here to create it. So we simply gave it some instructions. Yeah? So when the user prompt starts, ask for the value proposition. And then, like you would do with prompting, we have kind of created here a chain of thought prompt where we say, okay, based on the value proposition of the user, these are the steps you need to take. And in that way, it can quite easily create a table. Yeah? So that's the power of these GPTs. Actually, without any coding required, you can start building your own applications in a no-code environment. So this can be a good alternative. If you don't have kind of the coding skills, then this could be a very good first step. There might be some limitations, or it's sometimes a bit more flexible. You cannot steer the application that much. But also here, for instance, you can, if you want, let it go to the web to search for information. It can even generate images. And you could even, if you want, use the data analysis GPT to analyze data if you want. Yeah? So actually quite some things are possible here. Yes, so that's another tool that we use for the kind of creation of hypotheses. And of course, in the end, our students have to start validating these hypotheses. And for that, we use what we call minimal viable products. So we expect our students to create first tangible representations of their product or their service that are good enough for a user to understand what they need, what they want to build, but we don't need to have the fine nitty-gritty details. Yeah? So what we want is the donut as presented here as minimal viable product without the sprinkles. But of course, for a user, it needs to be clear what a donut means. Yeah? So we just don't want to show them buttermilk and eggs or the first ugly step of the processing. No, we want to show them the donut without the sprinkles. Now, the good news is that today, again, with generative AI, creating minimal viable products has become very easy and straightforward. And a first quite straightforward tool is DALL-E and ChatGPT. And of course, you also have Midjourney and all other kinds of image generating tools that can already be helpful to help you in creating at least a kind of digital version of your product. Now, let me just show you as an example. So here I did a prompt where I simply, again, gave my value proposition as input. Yeah? So again, an app for monitoring energy bills. And I simply asked it, please create an icon for the following app. And then already I have a kind of icon. Now, you might have already heard about that. These tools have difficulties with generating text. So that's still an issue that is not yet been solved. So sometimes you need to experiment a bit with different approaches. So there are still some limitations with these tools, but at least to get some images that can help you in visualizing your solution, these tools can be quite handy. However, more recently, I think there have been some more interesting developments, especially in Claude AI. So Claude AI is a competitor of ChatGPT. It's actually being created by some former ChatGPT employees. And they have their own large language model. Again, it's nowadays freely available also in Europe. And the nice thing is they recently created something that they call artifacts. And with these artifacts, you can actually create very easily first versions of apps in Claude AI. And let me show you how that looks like. So here I have created an example. So now we have to briefly wait for Claude AI to open up. So what I did was I created an example where I wrote the following prompt. So here actually I wanted to create a fitness app. And I've given it some information. So I'm saying, look, here is the input that should be asked to the user in the interface. So you should ask personal goals, fitness level, how much time is available to do some exercises, and do they prefer high intensity or low intensity? So you need to give kind of some input, and then you need to create a recommendation. That's the app I want to make so that people can click some preferences, and based on these clicks, a recommendation should be created. So this is the prompt that I did. And then if you press enter, it actually starts creating a lot of code for the app. And then the app can actually be used. So if I now click here on the app, here is the app. So you will see if I now click on my preferences like this, and I then click on generate recommendation, it indeed gives me a recommendation. And the nice thing is you can even publish these apps and copy them. So if I now go to another screen, I can share this app, and it then really looks like a kind of first web application. Let me see if it works now. I might have to refresh it. Yes, now it works. And so again, now it looks like an app where I can just press my preferences. And generate a recommendation. And I have my recommendation. So to create minimal viable products of apps, this is a very powerful tool. And maybe we can try something live here. So if I do a new chat, let me try maybe to create an app for one of the value propositions that we developed. So here was the description. So I say copy. Now I go back to my Claude AI. Oh, now it's loading. It might be that because at the moment Claude AI is so popular that sometimes it's a bit overcrowded, but let us try. So I can just say, can you create for me an app based on the following value proposition? And then I do enter. So I just have given it the value proposition. And so now it says, okay, I will try to create an app. And you see it's now generating codes. It's using here what is called React code, which, to be honest, I am not familiar with. So this is also for me a bit of hocus pocus. But you see quite some code is generated. And look, I now have already a kind of first family energy hub app. And it looks already quite fancy, to be honest. And so we can publish this now. So publish and copy a link. So let us take a look how it looks like. And this, of course, is something that you can easily share with the people that you want to see, that you want to show it to. So yes, show content. Yeah, so here you see a kind of, so it has created a kind of dashboard for energy usage where I can click on budgets, savings, education. Yeah, so again, of course, this is simply a minimal viable product, so nothing yet fancy, but at least you see that nowadays in less than 1 minute, you can create a first version of a minimal viable product for an app that you can share with customers or with investors to show at least what you have in your mind. So I think this is quite a powerful and very interesting tool that might change the game quite significantly. Yes, so that's how you can easily create nowadays minimal viable products. Of course, in the end, we have to collect data. Yeah, that means we might have to do surveys to test our hypotheses. We might do A/B experiments or additional interviews. And I've already shown you how you can do interviews in a synthetic manner. Again, also for testing hypotheses, you can use synthetic interviews. Now, what I tried here, and to be honest, this is still very experimental, but at least I wanted to kind of test what is possible. And it would be great also to get feedback because I also don't yet know what to think of this. Here, what I tried is to think about, okay, can we do actually synthetic survey research? Which means instead of asking real people to fill in surveys, can we leverage generative AI to act as respondents and answer questions? And I actually kind of did 3 steps. So first of all, of course, we need to create a sample of respondents. Now, to do that, we can again use ChatGPT because ChatGPT has a very good tool called data analytics. Data analytics is a specific tool where it can create code based on your instructions. And so what I did here using the data analytics GPT is actually to ask it to create a sample. And I'm saying, look, my sample should be a randomized sample of people living in Germany with at least 5 years of working experience and younger than 70 years old. So I asked to create 100 respondents, and as output, I wanted to have a table with following information, so age, gender, and years of working experience. And then actually what the data analytics GPT is doing, it's creating codes. Yeah, so here you can see the code, the Python code that it has created to create this random sample. And then you receive indeed an output, a table here with random people with random ages, gender, years of experience. And then you can download this table. So that's what I did. And subsequently, I have developed an application, again, with agents, where the agent can actually kind of, for every person in the sample, kind of try to immerse itself into that person based on the information that you give it. Yeah. So if I'm saying, look, you're a 48-year-old woman with 10 years of working experience, then I ask it, okay, try to immerse yourself in that identity. And based on that identity, then try to answer the question that the user is giving you. So let me show you how it works. And again, I made this publicly available so that you can also experiment with it to see what you think of it. So the logic is again the same. We need a Croc API key. Oh, I think I have already the application open here, so let me do it here. So again, you need to give your Croc API key. Then you need to upload your random sample. Yeah, so here I have uploaded the CSV file that ChatGPT has created for me. So that already uploaded. So this is this table actually. This table I have now uploaded in my application. Now here I just did it for 10 people, so not 100, but only 10. And now here I can ask a question. So for instance, let us think, we could say, what is the most likely concert you will attend? And then let's give it 3 options. So we can say, do you want to go to a concert of Taylor Swift? Do you want to go to the concert of Oasis? or to a concert of the Rolling Stones. Yeah. And now we can do submit. Now you can see it's running. So now for all the 10 people in my Excel file, it's trying to get into the identity of that person and then answer the survey question based on that identity. And it will even give me, for every answer, an explanation of why this person will give this answer. Yeah, so you will see here that the 41-year-old female with 6 years of working experience wants to go to Taylor Swift. And here we have the kind of the explanation. Let me maybe briefly download it now so that we can see the full explanation. So let me briefly go to my downloads. So let me do that so that we can see it, the full explanation. So that's then in CSV that you automatically can generate out of the application. So let me show you the Excel. So here is the Excel sheet that you can get. Yes, so here then you get the full explanation of why this person with these characteristics actually should prefer this particular concert. Yeah. Now, to be very honest, I'm also a bit struggling to think about how seriously should we take this? Are these reliable answers or not? To be honest, I don't have yet the perfect answer. Again, I think the more kind of upfront input you give, the better it will be able to really kind of immerse into the identity, and the better the results might be. Moreover, there is now academic research that have tried to do similar things. So I've seen research where people have really tried to start replicating academic experiments with AI agents pretending to be participants, and they were actually able to replicate quite some results. So there definitely seems to be something there. And of course, it's a very efficient way to quickly get first results. I would say it definitely does not kind of substitute for collecting data from real people. But again, it might be a good first step to get some quick and dirty results, to learn what are good questions to ask, especially because you now also get the explanations. So I quite see some potential in it, but I also have to admit that at the moment it's still quite experimental. And of course, when you have then created the data, you can again analyze these data with, for instance, the data analytics GPT. And that's GPT is very good in doing statistical analyses, to do hypothesis testing. So again, it's a very powerful tool that you can use here. Okay, that's actually what I wanted to show you today about what are actually options that we have to accelerate business model development. So I hope that you have seen that AI agents can be very powerful tools to kind of automate rather complex tasks. And by using, for instance, open source models like Llama, that at the moment you can easily kind of leverage, for instance, on the Croc Cloud for free by using an API key. At the moment, actually, we can use these applications in a very cost-effective manner. Yeah? So my students, I'm, for instance, in the entrepreneurship course, I have 300 students who are using these tools, and it doesn't have any costs for me, but also not for the students. So I think that's a nice approach at the moment. I would say the disadvantage of these AI agent applications is that they need to be hard-coded. So at the moment, if you want to develop them yourself, you need to really know coding in Python. Whereas, for instance, you can also use the GPTs in ChatGPT, where these are no-coding tools, so they might be a bit more flexible. And today, even in the free version of ChatGPT, you can use some GPTs with some restrictions. So that could be a good alternative. But again, I have open sourced the applications that we have. So if you want to experiment with them in your own education or in other contexts like incubators and accelerators, please do so. And please also give me some feedback. It's always nice to hear what other people are doing with this kind of applications. Finally, some final advertisement. If you want to know more or to learn more, we are also organizing again an online bootcamp. So there I go much deeper into different prompting strategies, how you can build GPT applications for your own business activities, what can be the power of these AI agents in a business setting. So if you're interested in that, or you know a colleague that could be interested, you can definitely refer to this program. In our MBA programs, we've also started to develop dedicated generative AI courses. So both in the executive MBA as the online MBA program, we now have a generative AI course, but also in our full-time MBA and part-time MBA, we will start providing dedicated workshops on generative AI. So if you're thinking about an MBA and you want to know more about generative AI, definitely check out our WAU programs because they might be a good fit for you. And I'm also offering customized workshops for companies. So if you think it would be good within your own company that somebody can provide a bit more insight in what is possible today with generative AI for business applications, how these AI agents could be interesting in your particular company, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Then I'm always open and willing to discuss the possibilities. Okay, thank you for watching the recording. I hope this gave some new inspiration. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have feedback or if you are experimenting yourself. It's always interesting to know what other people are doing. But I hope this has given you some inspiration about what is possible today with generative AI in terms of business model development.